You've heard it before. Gardening is difficult. It definitely can be a challenge. So, how do you measure success in the garden? Join me today as I share with you some thoughts on how to be a successful gardener. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and while it might look like it's the middle of winter for me in my Colorado Zone 5B garden, it's actually spring. It's past the middle of spring. It's May 21st to be exact. Summer is 1 month away. And in the last 24 hours, I've had over a foot of snow. That's not unusual for me in my 7,500 feet elevation garden. In fact, it was exactly 3 years ago, before I moved into this house, that we had a very similar storm, dropping a lot of snow with very cold temperatures. Last night in my garden, it got down to 25 degrees Fahrenheit, a hard freeze, enough to kill most plants. And with all this happening, I actually feel pretty successful right now. How you measure success in your garden can make a big difference on whether you're enjoying it and will continue to be a gardener for years to come, or if you give up early. I think too many of us measure gardening success at the end of the season. How good a harvest did we have? How beautiful were our flowers? Instead, I like to look at it one day at a time, and by the hour and the minute within each of those days. How many successes do I have while I'm gardening? I knew this storm was coming. A big part of how I measure success is acceptance, but it's also anticipation. I knew it was coming, I anticipated it, and I've been asked recently why nothing is growing in my garden. Well, it's because of days like this. I always give myself a buffer between my average last frost date and when I plant out most of my vegetable garden. My last frost date was 3 days ago, and you can see this is why I build a buffer into my plants. Nothing was growing in my garden because not only 3 years ago, but the last 2 years, we had extremely cold days on this date. So it makes sense for me to anticipate that that's going to happen, and then just accept that that's part of my garden plan. I can't put my seeds and plants in on or near my average last frost date because there's the possibility of a big snowstorm and the deep drops of temperature. This is going to pass. And in a couple days, it's going to be warm again. So by accepting this and planning for it, I consider this a success because I don't have the plants in the ground that would have been killed by a storm like this. After sitting all winter, my compost pile was cool and I wanted to give it a jump start. So I turned it and started measuring the temperatures. Even on a day like today, right now it's below freezing. My compost pile is just about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a success. Doesn't matter that it's covered with snow. The bacteria are alive, they're decomposing, and this compost is going to be ready in probably just a few weeks. Even in snow, you can find those kind of successes in the garden. The plants that had already started growing are still alive underneath this snow because I choose the kind of plants that can handle cold and snow. My asparagus might look a little wilty right now in the cold, but it's going to bounce back. Some of the branches might be broken off under the weight of the snow. I'm not concerned by that. It's all going to be okay. And the snow is actually a great insulator. I know that underneath all this snow, my mint that can handle freezing temperatures is doing just fine. I am a little concerned about these brand new apple trees that I've got growing in these pots. They're just starting to leaf out. But apple trees are pretty tough, so I think they can handle the cold. There's snow and ice on them, and you may have seen that in areas like Florida, when they start to get cold and they have that frost or freeze predicted, they'll spray the trees with water so that the leaves do have ice form on them. That's one way of protecting some of the growth. Nature just did it in this case. Even if these trees don't survive, I still look at this as a success because I got these pots, I got these trees, I learned how to grow them. I even made a video about it. That's one of the ways I measure success in the garden, is actually getting to those tasks that I've had planned for years. I fully expect and hope, of course, that these trees are going to survive, but regardless, this was a successful project that will help me move forward in the garden. I've spent a lot of time in recent weeks putting cages around my trees and new bushes to keep the deer and mala from eating them. And it actually adds an interesting visual element in a snow like this. The insulating snow should enable these plants to survive. Even if they don't, again, this was a project that needed to be done. I got it done. If I have to replace the plants, it's okay. But more likely, I'll be able to sit back and realize this is something checked off my list and I can move on to other things. That's a success. You might be able to see it better here. My little mini orchard is completely protected from the animal pests in my garden. And the poles I put with the bird netting are actually helping the trees stay erect underneath the heavy snow. And this is a new addition to my garden as well. A new visual element that spins in the wind, and I like the look of it, especially against the snowy backdrop. Now, storms like this are not all good. In the recent past, these storms have caused tremendous damage throughout my area. Trees broken, branches falling on houses and trees. That is not good at all. But being the kind of gardener who looks for the bright side, I recognize that all of those branches, all of those cut down trees are going to be taken to a local site that chips up those trees to be turned into mulch. And that's actually where I got all of the mulch for this garden area. From that storm 3 years ago, when I first moved here shortly after, I got trailer loads of those chips and stacked them off to the side in a back corner. But as I put these trees in place, I had the mulch all ready to go. So even when something looks dire, all the broken branches and trees, they might find a place in a garden. They certainly found a place in my garden. A lot of work, but a successful amount of work. I've got the mulch, I've got the visual element, I've got my trees surrounded. Now I can move on to other things. Now, I don't hope for failure and adversity, but I recognize that in failure we can find success. We can learn from our failures. We can find that bright star, that shining moment. I look at my garlic and it's buried under the snow, but yesterday it was doing great. And tomorrow it will be doing fine too. Maybe some of the branches might be bent or broken, but all of the work, all of the preparation to grow this garlic was done. And the garlic was showing that my efforts were exactly what needed to be done. I don't measure the success at the end of the season. It's these moments along the way. I would love to have a full harvest of tomatoes in all the places that I plan to grow, but I have a short season and I have to be very selective in the types of tomatoes that I grow. So if I get a single tomato from each of my plants, I consider that a success. And as I try new plants, if the plant grows and flowers and maybe starts to fruit when the next freeze and the next snow comes, probably in September for me, well, at least I'll have learned and enjoyed growing during the period that that plant was alive. And it will have taught me something, either to try the plant again, or maybe try a different plant, or realize that some plants just won't grow in my short season. It's all educational. It's all part of gardening. And it's what keeps me going and keeps me successful. A big thing to come out of this storm is the amount of precipitation, the moisture that's going to be added to the soil. We are under severe drought conditions, and we have not had any measurable rain or snow for months. So all of this snow is making up for that. It's still not enough to take us out of a drought, but it's going to do a lot for my garden. I've been watering almost every day with the plants that are actively growing right now. There are many areas of my garden that need moisture for the soil organisms, but my garden's just too big to water everything. This snow will accomplish that. So it saves me hours, days of watering. I consider that a success. Most of gardening is a philosophy. It's a mindset. It's how we approach our time outside, and I think how we approach life in general. And so, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. When life gives you a snowstorm, look at the bright side and how it's going to make some of your gardening easier. When you have successes, definitely enjoy every moment of them. But with the failure, the adversity, all the things that go wrong, well, just take that as part of gardening and move on, move forward, and do it with a smile and an increased knowledge so that you can be even more successful in the future. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.